Well, folks, it's the time we finally wrap up this little retrospective series on the Vision of Escaflowne. Or at least it would be, as the script I'm about to read was originally for the conclusion of this retrospective, but as I began the talk on the tertiary cast of the series, and, well, that script ballooned to the point where I decided that it should be its own video. Now, Vision of Escaflowne has a rather wide cast of tertiary characters, and while none of them really deserve a video on their own, I do feel that they should be mentioned, as like any tertiary cast, they really do help to flesh out the world of the series and to make it more identifiable and relatable to the viewer. Starting off with the least significant and working our way up, we have bit roles like that of King Aston. Now, this is Malerna's dad and the King of Asturias. He's in most of the series, although he doesn't necessarily have any prominent roles, other than being the guy who tells Malerna, "You are going to marry Dryden." He represents a kind of authoritative and forceful heir. He's very shrewd and at times callous, although this does seem to partially be in part due to the death of Marlene, whom he did seem to genuinely love. He does tend to put the kingdom first, and as a result, he makes decisions which are not necessarily taken very well by those that he makes them at the expense at, particularly Malerna, whom he decides to dictate her decisions to instead of letting her make her own decisions. He is a bit overbearing, although while he isn't very likable, he does seem realistic to me. The moves he makes, whether that's submitting the Zybok, to arranging dynastic marriages, to trying to help Vaughn and then immediately selling him out when it proves too costly, all seem like things a real medieval ruler would do. I don't necessarily like him, but I don't necessarily think that's the point. I will say that everything he does feel logical, and he seems, if not a cold and callous ruler, then probably a competent one. Next is Gaddes, Kaio, and Brooklyn Vinny, I don't think that's his real name, and the rest of Alan's knights. These guys are cool. They're just competent soldiers following orders and getting the job done. They generally go everywhere the main cast does, although as supporting characters, of course, they don't necessarily get many roles or scenes to themselves. Maybe a comedy scene here or there, and I think Gaddes does have a few, parting bits of scenes focused on him. Gaddes himself does show him to be rather trustworthy, a solid second in command in the brief times that he gets to show this. Well, again, he never really gets a scene to himself. And in the English version of Escaflowne, Alan's crew isn't necessarily super fleshed out, although I do like that in the Japanese version, everyone calls everyone else a bum. This of course is done in good fun, and it really does make it seem like this is just a bunch of guys just kind of giving each other grief while on the job. It makes them seem chummier, and it just makes them seem warmer, I guess, and more fun. On the topic of chums, there next is Eriya and Nariya, Vulcan's cat assassins, the Leopard Sisters. I think these characters are a great example of tertiary staff, as they're very defined in their presence, in their character, in their actions, and their motivations, in spite of their limited screen time. It does seem that they're very attached to Vulcan, to the point where they will recklessly put their lives on the line in order to serve him. However, they do so out of a genuine gratitude, and this helps establish Vulcan as not a cold psychopath. In fact, in some ways they are relatable, and it makes sense why they would follow Vulcan. They were persecuted by a world that just had it out for them, and they were taken in by this man who simply wanted to give them another chance. Again, this helps flesh out Vulcan, and their own presence in the series is one of danger, I guess. It's kind of hard to sum up in words, but they do have a very noticeable presence, and they also show Vaughn that his brother is not a psychopath, and their death, due to Dornkirk's lack of empathy, help finally push Vulcan to betray Dornkirk. Another set of lives drastically affected by Dornkirk's callous actions are those of the Chads of Freid. Yes, I said Chads plural, as both these guys seem pretty cool. Chads of Freid is the original Duke of Freid, and while not initially likable, I found him to be quite respectable. At first he comes off as a little severe, although it's made pretty clear later on that he's just trying to hold everything down in a time of crisis, and that he really does love Sheed. He does, however, know that his son is going to inherit great responsibility, and wants to raise him in a strict enough manner to make sure that he can take the pressure when it's applied to him. He really comes off as sort of an old world dad, I guess. He isn't super warm, and it's obvious that he isn't super emotional, but he definitely has a heart, and he definitely loves his family, as proven by the fact that he A, accepted Marlene in spite of her having Alan's child, and he genuinely seemed to love her, and B, that he raised said child, Sheed, as his very own. While he isn't always the warmest towards Sheed, it seems he's just trying to raise him in a strict manner to prepare him for the title of Duke, which he will inherit. It's obvious that he loves him, and he definitely trusts him to lead too, as seen by the fact that he accepts his death knowing that Sheed will make a good ruler in his stead. He does trust him by the end of his time on screen. He also gets bonus points for single-handedly calling out Zybok and telling them to fight man to man. I mean, this is really dumb, but it's also really epic and brave. Sheed, for his part, is also worthy of respect for his conduct. I mean, this guy's like 7 tops, and yet he conducts himself with more maturity and self-control than some of the main cast at times. He understands that he's got a lot of responsibilities, and that his dad and his nation and everyone is depending on him, and trusting him to carry the team once he inherits the throne. And for the most part, it seems he does. Yeah, he cries a little, but I mean, who probably wouldn't in this scenario? More importantly, he doesn't give up and he stays strong. He knows that even though he's lost the fight at the Fortuna Temple and basically has to submit to Zybok, that that's not the end of his country, and that he has to remain around for his people in order to try and eventually liberate them, or at least make life under Zybok more tolerable. While Sheed would probably benefit from talking to someone about his trauma later in life, it's no doubt that, like his dad, he's also a Chad. Next up is the part that was originally dedicated to Leon, Alan's dad. However, like in the series, he happened to run out. Instead, he ended up alone and got his own video. It's the one where I ranted about him. I don't like this guy. He's a douche, and I don't know why the series holds up a man who ruined his family so highly. It's very confusing to me. If you want to learn more about him and his odd writing / tone, he got his own video linked in this convenient card here. He's just a... Going back to the script, next is Merle. I don't really know how to handle this character, as on one hand she seemed very important. I mean, she is in every episode after all, and does have occasional important moments. But on the other hand, for the most part, she's just a cat. I mean, like any cat, she can be very warm or very petty, and she does seem to be quite temperamental at times. She does have a few critical moments, like when she protects Vaughn from the Leopard Sisters, and when she tells Hitomi to sort out her own feelings, but for the most part, she's just like a cat. I know this might be an unpopular opinion. I'm sure Merle has fans out there, but she's just doing cat stuff a lot of the time. I mean, she definitely affects the moods of many of the scenes she's in. She definitely warms up a lot of the scenes by either comforting Vaughn, or trying to talk to some other character, or establishing their empathy, or even serving as comic relief, but that's all I really can think of on the topic of her character. I mean, her relationship with Hitomi is quite interesting and developed. It's probably the longest running in the series, and feels very natural and nice, but again, she's just a cat 90% of the time, so I didn't really know how to make a video about her work, or even necessarily feel it was needed. So, next character. Finally, here we are. We get to Mole Man. I finally get to talk about this guy. Mole Man is so fascinating to me, as he is one of, if not the weirdest part of the entire series to me. Like, this guy, he just shows up randomly. He'll make or do something that makes a massive change or adjustment to the plot or some character development, and then he just disappears again until he's needed. He never talks to anyone outside of when he makes massive changes to the plot. He never really does anything unless it's to affect the plot. And no one even mentions this guy's name. No one knows who this guy is. They say Mr. Mole. That's about all we get. But for some reason, everyone seems to trust this guy, and even if they didn't, he always figures out a way to tag along anyways. He's critical to the plot and many character developments along the way, but he never has a plot or scene of his own. It's to the point where it seems to pass unintentionally bad writing, and I'm wondering if it crosses over into intentionally mysterious writing. Like, this guy's amount of screen time is so little that it doesn't even feel like he's tagged on, because it's not even enough to really make that complaint about. He just kind of shows up and then makes a big change and then leaves. Like, what's this guy's deal? Why is he so important? Why does he always happen to be around when needed? How is he the guy exercising almost more agency than some of the characters, the cast sometimes? Is he a self-insert for some writer or something? What is the point of Mole Man? He just raises so many questions. He moves the plot along, and then he disappears until he's needed again. It may seem really weird, but I do list him as the most important tertiary cast for a reason, as he really does shape the entire plot of the series throughout the entire running of the series. If you don't believe me, here are just a few examples proving this, and I'm sure I'm leaving some out. He provides life-saving Glar leaves to Vaughn in episode 3 to save Merle. He snitches on Malerna when she gets Alan out of jail, which forces her in turn to start her own journey of self-discovery on her own. Later, he also convinces Malerna to try surgery on Alan, both boosting her confidence and saving a member of the main cast's life. Mole Man later hints to Malerna not to marry Dryden, prompting her to get a reading from Hitomi and kicking off that interaction. He tells the rest of the cast that Vaughn and Hitomi went to Finalia to go find Falcon, which furthers Alan's distrust of Hitomi and leads to more awkwardness in that relationship, eventually culminating in her departure. And these are just some highlights of Mole Man's actions. Again, he's almost never in the series, but every time he shows up, something big happens, probably mostly indirectly due to him. For some reason, Mole Man is just kind of everywhere and nowhere at the same time, molding the plot, shaping the characters, and yet not really having a plot or character of his own. It's just very curious to me, and I want to know more about this guy. However, with him, that's just about all of the tertiary cast of Escaflowne. Again, while none of these characters really deserved a standalone video in my eyes, it is important to mention them, as, like any series, the tertiary cast is an important touch which can really flesh out and enhance a series, and that's exactly what these characters do. They add a layer of relatability and realism, showing that even the quote-unquote unimportant can have a drastic and positive impact on the world around us, around them. They show that everyone has some value or impact, and that anyone can influence the world in some way, shape, or form. And on a logistical standpoint, they really do just help make the world of Gaia seem more fleshed out and warm. The presence of these small bit pieces make us feel more included in the story itself as we play our own role in life. In this way, they really do help to enhance the true Vision of Escaflowne.